looking at the diagram and the left-hand side of that brain, bearing in mind it's an analogy, it's not literally what goes on, what structures can we see those people working within?
Well, the left one is more organised than the right one
Yes.
is more free.
And they're in all they're in cubicles, aren't they? They're in boxes. So on the left brain, perhaps people are compartmentalising the way that they live, and they take comfort in that, perhaps. However, as it says later on, things are always coming and going out of that box, because the point is it has to be seen as credible information. So the analogy is that the world was seen as being flat many years ago, now it's known to be round. So things are coming in and out of those boxes. However, what can we see on the right-hand side? Certainly no boxes. What's going on with those people on the right-hand side?
Living their life.
And they seem to be having a great time, don't they? Great time. They're enjoying themselves, they're being creative, they're playing music, they're reading, doing all sorts of interesting things. Now, we might see people enjoying their lives as thinking in a way that wouldn't suit me. And you might say, well, there's Jim, always away with the fairies, because his way of conducting his or her life, perhaps, isn't suitable to mine. However, they seem to be managing, perhaps, and maybe there's many other things going on that we can't immediately pin down because we can't put it in one of those boxes. So if people aren't in the box now, what's the phrase? They are now working outside of the box. They're not being constrained in those boxes. And maybe that's what business and industry needs, because new inventions and ways of doing things are only created by people who are thinking outside of the box. If you're constantly thinking inside the box, you will never move on, because you'll always be constrained by the sides of the box. So what else have we got going on here? Now, as a dyslexic person, perhaps, you might predominantly be using the right-hand side of the brain. And what structure can we see linking the left and the right-hand side of the brain in this picture here? Pathways, bridges.
Yeah, bridges.
Now, I'll give you an example of what one of my own learners' experience was. She was a very intelligent young woman, but very dyslexic. It had only been picked up at school late in life, so she'd had a really tough time. But she'd learned some coping mechanisms. However, she was on a driving lesson, and her driving instructor said to her, when you come to the next roundabout, could you please turn right? Now that's exactly what she did, but can you see a problem with that?
Yeah.
What was the problem?
She didn't go round the roundabout.
She
by the
didn't
sound
go
of
round
it.
the
She
roundabout.
went the wrong way and went right.
Yeah.
Because that's the logical side of your brain coming in.
Absolutely. So the bridges weren't there to connect to the left, thinking, should I be doing this? What are the consequences? Is it legal? Is it in the highway code? And some people on this course have said, well, what a stupid thing to do. Well, clearly it does seem stupid, but if you're a right-brain thinker, that's the way you work. It's like talking to young people where you've said, I've told this person time and time again, and they're just not getting it. Well, if you're a right-brain thinker, you can't ever get it, perhaps, unless you do things differently. It's like going abroad and saying, look, if I speak English loudly and slowly, everybody will understand me.
No.
It's not going to work, is it?
No.
So as trainers then, we've got to decide to bother with some people, to get to know them and try and work out, well, how are they going to work, how are they going to take on board this stuff, which is important, but in different ways. So think back to your own school days and think, did all of your teachers generally bother with you? Or maybe some did and some didn't?
Okay on the TV, but it's going to turn off his.
He's got
Well
a time
done.
out on it.
Yes. You okay, is it?
It's usually in the middle of the fire.
That's the one. Well spotted.
My
Thank you
television
both.
only does.
You
can turn that off.
Yes.
You can find the setting, you can turn that off.
So you're in that rush looking for the remote.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you for that, Ryan. So we're thinking back to your school days then. Do you feel your teachers generally bothered with you or not, perhaps?
No.
Some did, some didn't, maybe?
No.
No, just one of a number, I think.
Yeah. But you can see how them not bothering may have affected your whole lives. Because you'd have taken on board, well, clearly this subject isn't for me. Even though you thought you might enjoy it, you didn't. With me, it was physics. I thought I really loved physics because it was the time of the space race, people getting to the moon. I thought, great, I really love physics, but it was just so boring. After a year, I switched to art.
I think if the teacher enjoyed it, then he would be more.
Possibly, but the point is the teacher can be very enthusiastic, but the trick is to allow the learners to be equally enthusiastic, which is quite a trick to do actually. But if you can transfer that to your learners, you're onto a winner, and that will affect their whole lives. So bothering with our trainees can be really important for so many reasons. Your own credibility, your reputation, and actually the enjoyment that you get from training, because you'll get more out of it if your learners are. So it's a win-win situation. So people who are dyslexic then may have the issue that they can't connect to their left brain terribly easily, perhaps. Because creative people, they might be right brain thinkers, they are in big demand in areas which need creative solutions. Has anybody heard of GCHQ? What is GCHQ?
It's the government communications, electronic intelligence headquarters. It sort of monitors things all around the world. And
They know when the Russians are going to be bringing those nuclear trains or lorries to the Ukrainian border, which they've spotted already. So it's looking a bit worried.
Yes.
But the point is, those employees there are recruited because they are dyslexic, because they are autistic, because they can focus very thoroughly on certain things. Let's have a look at some famous people in a moment, but we've got some questions to think about first, at the bottom. So I'm on page 26, right at the bottom now. Have a look at number 1, and let's see what the answer might be. So, school children aged 4 to 7, is their school environment generally a left or a right-hand brain environment? Why do you say right? You're quite right generally, but why do you say that?
At that age.
The brain's, kind of the brain's developing and
Yes.
there's a lot.
And they're trying to encourage the creative side out of them rather than teach them and lecture them. So
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
social
skills and all the rest
problem-solving
of it.
skills,
It's
absolutely.
often through play, isn't it?
Absolutely, but that wasn't always the case.
No.
You
It's
know,
often
50 years ago perhaps, everybody, no matter how young was, talked at all day long.
Mm.
Clearly it just wouldn't work. You may be aware that in Scandinavia, the school starting age, the formal school starting age is what, do you think?
7.
It's 7, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now clearly stuff goes on beforehand, but it's not formal schooling. And you can perhaps put your children into other environments maybe. I think it's Norway, in the senior school, they say no homework. Now how does that compare with your own children? Do they get loads of homework?
Yeah, I think in general they do.
Yeah, in general they do
They
tend
do.
to, especially in secondary school, they get so much homework.
Absolutely. So why does Norway say generally no homework?
Because you only got a limited attention span.
It could be. They actually value the fact that you learn a hell of a lot just by getting on with your life, being with friends, developing other skills. Is Norway known for a poor academic achievement or not?
No, it's good.
No.
It's one of the best.
Yes.
So it doesn't work trying to cram youngsters in a very pedagogic way. They're not going to react to it well. So what employers generally want are problem-solving skills. Do people have the nous and the common sense to solve problems then? They don't need to know the answers, but they need to know where to get them from. That's what it's all about. Right, number 2 then. What might the answer to number 2 be?
That's
Left brain, yeah. So we're looking at children aged 11 to 16 then, and generally it's a left-hand brain environment at school, very generally speaking. Because when we get to GCSEs, perhaps we look at exam technique. There's meant to be a sort of logical approach to doing exams, and if you follow that logical approach, then you're made. But if some of us just can't get to grips with that logical approach, we feel a failure, and it affects our whole lives. And the final question then, number 3. So what labels might children get then?
Daydreamer.
Yes?
Lazy.
Absolutely. Any worse?
Don't apply themselves.
Yeah. It seems to get worse and worse as you get older. So by the time you're 16, they might say, well, you get the feeling that you're just a bit dim, you're a bit thick perhaps. And you might think when you leave school, well, clearly education is not for me, because you had such a terrible time with it. However, some people do go on to further education, and the lecturers at the colleges of further education have come from a very different perspective. They've been at work, they've been around, they possibly have the conditions that some children had at school when they were young, and they operate on a very different level. So going to college and further education can be quite a different learning experience, and some people realise, actually, I'm not thick, I can do it. It's their sort of second bite of the cherry, really. So again, this is life-changing. And as trainers, you're in a position of helping people, bothering with those people or not.